Beijing is at the center of the discovery of one of the biggest gold scandals, which could lead to a blanket ban against Chinese companies in the US. Yes, one of China's biggest gold companies, Kingold Jewelry, has taken a loan of $2.8 billion against only pure gold, beg your pardon, as collateral. Well, the scandal was discovered when the company defaulted in repayment of its loan, and it was found that what they claimed as gold was actually not gold but gilded copper. Yes, the company misrepresented to the tune of 83 tons of the yellow metal. That's equivalent to 22% of China's annual gold production, or 4.2% of China's gold reserves as of 2019. This obviously is a huge jolt to Chinese creditworthiness as well. Last month, remember, the United States Senate had passed a bill, in fact, which if signed could also lead to the loss of 800 Chinese companies getting delisted from US stock exchanges. Yes, Chinese giants such as Alibaba and Baidu are said to be the worst hit if this bill does clear the House, and Chinese giants, of course, are very worried at these impending developments. In fact, we're learning the bill was triggered by the Luckin Coffee scam, which had exaggerated its sales by a whopping $310 million. American investors are losing interest in Chinese firms. It's possible now that the money is going to the CCP, as private companies and firms in China are, remember, hardly private. And to take this forward, we have with us a special panel. In fact, joining us this evening, we have on the broadcast Ambassador Achal Malhotra, former diplomat, who's live with us. We also have Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, who's joining us live. Sumit Peer, political analyst, is also live with us. And Joyita Basu, editor of the Sunday Guardian, is with us live as well. Let me begin with you first, Sumit, if I can. Clearly, it seems that the creditworthiness of Chinese businesses is going to be taking a huge hit in the United States of America. And what do you also make of this blatant fraud that a Chinese company committed, passing off gilded copper as gold?
Uday, thank you very much for having me on your show. When we look at China now, the only more and more skeletons are coming out of the cupboard. First of all, what Chinese have been doing, they have been doing for quite a lot of time before. It's only now the things are coming into light because after the President Donald Trump has taken the control. Before that they had quite a good of a run in United States of America. Now, Uday, 83 tons of gold. It is not a mistake. It is not even a copy. It is a fraud where you are, kind of counterfeiting 83 tons of metal and presenting it as gold. Now, it doesn't only stop here. You talked about the 800 companies. Let us talk about Alibaba. There was a lot of interesting thing about Alibaba is because this is all orchestrated by Chinese Communist Party. Now, Alibaba is headed by Jack Ma. 2 years back, even on your show, I remember once I told you, I suspect he's a member of Chinese Communist Party, which he later confirmed he's a member of Chinese Communist Party. Now, what do you do? You start an interface called Jack Ma. You give him a monopoly on whole of the China. Give him a monopoly on whole of the China. No other e-commerce is allowed. You have to buy from Alibaba. Then you get the same person listed in a United States exchange. And by the way, the United States public companies accounting overseas board cannot audit their books. So the Chinese present numbers, they present their books, get and make money from US investors on US exchange. Then this money is used back to send to China through these conduits. Now that's why Jack Ma incidentally said, even Chinese Communist Party wants to take all my shares, I'll be willing to give, because the shares were never with him at the first go. He's just an interface. You see how it is happening with that. Now the Chinese Petroleum Corporation, CNPC, now these are the companies which are shown the highest revenue getters in the world. They are again listed on American stock exchanges, get the money, siphon the money out and route it back to the activities and designs of CCP. This is what's happening. Now, on the contrary, Coca-Cola tried to buy a bottling plant in Yunnan province for $2.8 billion. They were denied. Now, Qualcomm was fined $275 million saying that you are monopolistic on the mobile phone processors. And they were forcibly made to reduce their royalties to Chinese mobile operators on the chips they were supplying them. This is how China plays. If somebody with a legitimate business is fined $275 million and you don't let Coca-Cola buy a bottling plant in China, while as you are starting these shell shadow companies, getting them listed in the US stock exchange, siphoning the money through your conduits or your interfaces and letting it go back to Beijing. It's a scam of international proportion. And the point here is, Uday, without political patronage, political view, and political support,
So clearly,
these
Joyita,
kind of
what
scams are
Sumit
not
is saying
possible.
is, that these are very unethical practices, Joyita, but not something new. These have been continuing for a very long time with economic and political patronage, and it's only now that it's all coming to light. But surely now something needs to be done about it. There's clearly, of course, a delisting black shadow hanging over several prominent Chinese companies. Several other gold companies probably won't be doing business after this scandal, of course, exploded. And do you believe finally now more and more countries should realize that this is the scam, this is the fraud that Chinese companies were carrying out, which has obviously led to the boom in their economy?
You see, if this is taken to its logical conclusion, not just in the US but also globally, just the way our app ban also, if it is taken up, and there is a possibility that other countries will also take up this, and will continue to ban Chinese apps. If that happens, if it is taken to its logical conclusion, it is going to take the bottom out of China's economy. And you see, that is what the attempt is basically, to ensure that China implodes. You will not be able to possibly defeat China militarily, but what can happen, you see, once the unrest starts from within, once there are no jobs, we know what happened with Soviet Russia. We know, but of course, Soviet Russia was it was a different form of a government in the sense, I mean, the authoritarian both ways, but Soviet Russia was much, much poorer than what China is. China is prosperous, but at the same time, China is going through some sort of an economic downturn. We do not know. I mean, China does not give any truth about any figures. China does not give anything. So we do not know what exactly the kind of economic activity has been hurt in China, not just because of coronavirus, but also because of the fight that Donald Trump, the trade war with the US. But the fact is that China is hurting economically. And once the world starts taking action, I mean, we don't know where the bottom will be. The China will not know where the bottom will be. It will be, I mean, it will be just sucked down a sinkhole. That possibility is very much there.
Indeed, and Gautam Mukherjee, do you believe that this is just the tip of the iceberg? This is just one company which has obviously defrauded, investors, and of course also, companies which have given it a loan in America by passing off pure gold, supposed pure gold, as gilded copper. This is perhaps just the tip of the iceberg. China is anyways not associated with genuineness and high quality and standard, is it? But this is, I mean, just absurd. But the big question is it just the tip of the iceberg?
uh, what has been happening is very reminiscent of 2008 in America, when the whole myth of too big to fail was exploded with Lehman Brothers and Goldman Sachs and all the big boys of Wall Street. And when you went into the detail of it, it was all about securitizing all sorts of bad assets, packaging them together like a kathi roll, and passing them around from one of the bankers to another, one underwriter to another. Now, I can talk of 20 years ago in Hong Kong, when I was at a conference and I was talking to some Chinese bankers from the mainland. And they said, look, between you and me, the banking system is hugely over-leveraged. And this is the real problem. The debts in every place around the world. 2008 is a good example right here in our country with the NPAs. What we find is when the going is good, you borrow more, nobody looks at the securities. You look at the general run and momentum of a company or the political connections of a particular, promoter, and it goes on and on and on. But when that bubble bursts, in the sense that the economy slows and you can't make the sales that you have assumed will carry on like they were, that's when you can't pay back. And when you can't pay back, then you're in trouble. So in India, which is a democracy, you just run away abroad, you defraud, you basically default and say do what you will, because you agreed to it as much as I took the loan. In China, the situation is far worse because it's totally opaque. It's the government dealing with the government, with other governments, covering up whatever it is doing, so it is state sponsored fraud. And this has been possible to sort of keep it under wraps for so long because it's state sponsored fraud. But now the state is hugely overextended and its engine has ground to a halt and things are collapsing, bits and pieces are breaking
That's
off.
the point. That's the point. Everything that China does must be linked to the CCP. Chinese sponsored fraud, Chinese sponsored propaganda through global times and whatnot. Australia has also been calling out Chinese sponsored cyber attacks,
Yeah.
state sponsored cyber attacks, beg your pardon, but we all, of course, know which state they're implying. So it all should be linked to the CCP. That's a very valid point that you're making. These should not be looked at as isolated incidents.
So this is, you see,
state-sponsored incidents. Okay.
in America, when all the companies like General Motors, all the banks, all the Wall Street people collapsed, then the government could come to the rescue because they said we don't want a repeat of the Great Depression when we allowed, when we talked of moral hazard and we wouldn't save the banks, over 100 of them collapsed, and then you had 10 years of misery. So we can't allow that. We will bail them out. Who can bail out a government when the government is itself the culprit?
Okay. Let me take that to Ambassador Achal Malhotra. Ambassador Achal Malhotra, while of course diplomatic consequences can continue for China and of course military ones if need be, but where they'll be hit the most will be the economic ramifications, isn't it? That's when China will feel the pinch. That certainly started in India through the banning of these 59 Chinese apps. It's also being looked at by multiple other countries. A Huawei ban is being looked at by the UK. We're seeing, of course, also now in the United States, this anti-China mood, which could now lead to delisting of several companies of Chinese descent. And also now, perhaps after this fraud has been exposed of this particular company, which I referred to at the start, there could be many more economic ramifications and consequences for the dragon. Is that the only way they will learn a lesson? Achal Malo.
Yeah, sure, Uday. There is absolutely no doubt that this fraud is yet another exposure of the manner in which China has been operating over the period of time. Over the years, we have seen that China has lost its credibility as a reliable, responsible nation and a reliable partner. And now, with these frauds coming to in the open, whatever credit worthiness it had, it's also going. And all over the world, there is a campaign, and primary focus is on hitting China's economy, because they know a weak China then will have no means to pursue its global aspirations, which is territorial expansionism and economic enslavement, particularly of the smaller and vulnerable countries. You see, it all started, I don't know, subtly and over a period of time. They came out with so-called development assistance to poor nations. Under the guise of so-called development assistance, we by now know it was actually a debt trap diplomacy. So there, China has already been exposed and its credibility has gone down the drain. And then the kind of tricks it has been playing on the economic side also are now beginning to get exposed. Now, even during the corona crisis, when it was at the peak, China had the audacity to sell faulty medical equipment, including to India. And then it was trying to take over companies which were distressed because of the COVID-19, setbacks. So all one by one, China's true colors, the China's, the character is being not only getting exposed, but all over the world there is now a sort of determination and resolution to weaken China. And you can weaken China economically more than in any other way. So we also are a part of this campaign. We have already taken some steps. In fact, we were, even before the face-off, we had already amended our foreign direct investment rules to make sure that China's, we were able to monitor the Chinese investments into the country.
Yeah.
And now after the face-off, of course, we have placed a ban on 59 apps, and that's also hitting. And these apps, yeah, they are not only purely a commercial venture, they are means of espionage in a way. They are part of their digital conquering of the world, through the digital means. So now, one by one, China is getting hit at all the points which are most vulnerable. And if the concerted opinion and a coordinated approach continues over a period of time, and if we don't get back to the business as usual with China, we will soon see a China which will be much, much weaker than, and it would by implication have a great impact on its nefarious global aspirations.
Okay, point taken. Joyita, now we are of course seeing a pullback by China. We broke earlier today, in fact, that new Chinese maps have been released, which shows that they've taken back their ownership and claim, of course, to PP14, which is the pre-May 5th position, which is something that, of course, India was insisting on. However, despite all these decisions now being taken militarily, should we continue this hard economic policy towards China?
Yes, we should. You see, there is no way that you can trust China. If you have seen that, that Ministry of Foreign Affairs, their statement, there they're talking about, we are talking in a very decent tone. They're talking about, we know who is in the right. We know we still have our claims on our territory and all that. So basically, they are still claiming Galwan Valley. And whatever has happened, the so-called troop pull out, that also we can call it a blip in China's broader plan, in the larger plan of having that middle kingdom, that imperial overreach, that plan that China has. It's a blip. So frankly, there is, and the thing is, you see, as long as there is China, as long as China continues the way it continues, China as a power that lies, that dissembles, that only depends on propaganda, that's basically a revisionist power. The very nature at the core, there's a problem at the core of China.
Yeah.
So unless China reforms itself, which it is unlikely to do when it is under the communist regime, China will always be a threat to not only India, to world. China is a threat to the whole world. So yes, we should continue to consider China as our enemy. China is not even adversary or rival, it's an enemy.
Okay. Achal Malhotra, if we speak about the US and China, now this story that we of course are looking at and focusing on today is playing out in the US vis-a-vis China. Of course, it has economic ramifications for the entire world. But if we talk now about the US and China, what do you really believe is brewing there? Is a trade war between US and China, a possibility which is now looking very likely, despite that deal, which of course was inked, just before this coronavirus pandemic exploded very suspiciously. The pandemic never came out before that deal was signed. People thought that things are going to get better between the US and China, but now with this back and forth that's been happening, these war of words it's on, what is the situation developing between the US and China? What are we going to see in the days ahead?
Well, if you look at the trends today, of course, there was a trade war. It was going on. They were negotiating. And Donald Trump, ever since he came to power, he has been very vocal about his America First policy and the fact that China has been, exploiting American markets, etc., etc. Post-COVID, the kind of signals that we are getting from the United States of America, and also like-minded countries like Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and to a great extent India also, are that Donald Trump is serious about hitting at China. Now, unless it is all part of his, electioneering campaign or trying to find a scapegoat for his, I would call failure, but inability to, contain COVID crisis and the kind of deaths and the kind of the way it has spread in, or to hold responsible China for everything that is going wrong on the economic front in USA. I hope that is not the reason. If Donald Trump is genuinely peeved over the fact that China has been taking America for a ride, and now particularly with things like this, And a short while ago, I think there is a Chinese coffee company, Lukin, which had, I think, reported exaggerated sales. And again, as a result, when it was exposed, the American investor, the common American investor, had suffered the most. So if that sentiment is becoming popular, then even Donald Trump will not be able to, move back from this. So by all available indications, yes, there is a genuine anti-China sentiment and anti-China campaign. My only question, which I asked earlier, raised earlier also was, are we likely, is everybody going to sustain it? Are we going to take coordinated and concerted action? Or will it become a business as usual from, say, 6 months or 1 year from now? Are we still keeping the windows open? Now,
Okay.
let me say, for example, now we have 59 apps that we are talking. The popular perception is we have banned it, but my understanding is we have still kept a window open by giving those companies an opportunity to come and explain that they are not a threat to our our national security. And hello,
Yeah,
so
we can hear you. Please go ahead.
so therefore, I hope it is not a temporary kind of a pressure on China which is being built up. In our case, for example, in the background of the face-off at the borders, and in other cases in the backdrop of elections, or in the case of Japan, Australia, because of their expansionist design. So if from here onwards, all the like-minded
Yeah.
countries are able to sustain this campaign, definitely then there is a sense in doing it.
I'm afraid time has run up already for
Yeah.
our debate. Thanks so much.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.